Have you ever thought about like what success really means? Especially when you're a teenager and you're trying to figure out like who you are and what you want to do with your life.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's a huge question for young people, isn't it? And the research you sent over gets right into that. How teens actually define success and how those definitions connect to, how happy and well-adjusted they
Right.
are.
And that's what we'll be digging into today. We're going to be taking a deep dive into this systematic review that pulls together 17 different studies, all looking at what success means to secondary school students. So that's like 12 to 18-year-olds.
Right. Exactly. Right in the thick of it all. So much change happening in their lives. And what's cool about this review is that it didn't just look at published research papers, the kind you normally see in journals. It also brought in this gray literature stuff.
Gray literature. What is that exactly?
It's like reports and working papers, things that haven't gone through that super formal publishing process. It gives us a wider perspective, I think, maybe a bit closer to how things actually play out in the real world.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to explore, you know, how do teenagers actually define success? Are there any differences between how boys and girls see it? And the big one, are certain ideas about success linked to greater well-being?
Yeah, those are the key questions.
Hmm.
And I think it's especially important because if you look at the research, there hasn't actually been that much focus on how teens themselves understand success. It's like this big concept we talk about, but we haven't really delved into their specific perspective.
It's about time we did then. So let's jump right in. One of the first things that struck me is that when we talk about success, we often think of those external achievements, right? Like good grades or, dominating in sports. Is that all it is for teens?
Well, the research actually found that success is way more complex than that. It's not just one thing. It's what they call multidimensional. There's a whole spectrum of ideas.
Okay, so what else is in there besides, those typical achievements?
So some teens definitely focus on those external markers, like you said, the grades, the sports victories. But there's also this whole other side where it's more about internal stuff, like self-development or setting goals that are really meaningful to them personally.
I could see that. So
Yeah.
it's not a one-size-fits-all definition. It really depends on the individual.
Exactly. And what the review highlights is that cultural and personal values play a big role in shaping these different perspectives on success. It's like those values are kind of the foundation, right?
Yeah, totally. Values shape how we see the world, what we prioritize,
Yeah.
what we strive for. So how do those values influence a teenager's idea of success specifically?
It's all about what they prioritize, right? Like if someone really values independence and creativity, maybe they see starting their own business as the ultimate success, even if it doesn't make them a ton of money.
I see. And on the flip side, if someone's family really emphasizes academic achievement,
Mhm.
maybe getting into a top university is like their definition of making it.
Exactly. And the studies actually asked teenagers who they considered successful. And the answers give us some really interesting insights into their values and who they look up to, but that's something we can come back to later.
Sounds good. But the point is, understanding what a teenager believes about success can tell us a lot about them,
Yeah.
right? Their values, their motivations, what drives them.
Absolutely. It gives us a glimpse into, their inner world, how they're forming their identity, what they aspire to. All this stuff is super interconnected and shapes their development, during this critical time in their lives.
Now, one of the things I found most fascinating in this review is the distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic success beliefs.
Hmm.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. This comes from something called goal contents theory. Basically, it says that intrinsic success beliefs are all about those internal motivations, like personal growth, strong relationships, contributing to your community, all that good stuff.
Okay, so intrinsic is about what feels good and meaningful to you personally.
Exactly. And extrinsic success beliefs, well, those focus on external rewards and validation. Things like wealth or image or fame. It's more about how you're perceived by others.
So kind of like keeping up with the Joneses a bit.
Yeah, kind of. And what's really interesting is that the research suggests these different beliefs have very different effects on well-being.
Oh, wow. So like does one lead to more happiness than the other?
Yeah, pretty much. What they found is that when teens prioritize those extrinsic goals, like being rich or popular or famous, it tends to be linked with negative outcomes.
Like what kind of negative outcomes?
Things like higher anxiety, lower overall well-being, less of what we call self-actualization and vitality. It's like they're chasing something, but it doesn't actually fulfill them.
That's kind of sad, actually. Like you achieve the thing you thought you wanted, but you're still not happy.
Right. And on the other hand, focusing on those intrinsic goals, personal growth, meaningful connections making a difference, that's linked with much greater well-being.
So it's all about what's driving you from the inside.
Yeah, it seems like those internal motivations are what really fuel happiness. In a way that chasing external validation often doesn't. It's like that saying, the journey is the reward.
And I guess with extrinsic goals, it's more about reaching that destination and then what?
Exactly. The satisfaction can be fleeting, and it always depends on what other people think, which can be so unpredictable.
Now, the review also mentioned some gender differences here. Didn't it say that girls tend to be more intrinsically motivated than boys?
Yes. While those positive effects of intrinsic goals on well-being seem to hold true for everyone, girls do tend to lean towards those goals a bit more often than boys.
Interesting. So why is it that focusing on these intrinsic things seems to be so beneficial for well-being? What's the underlying reason?
It has to do with basic psychological needs. Apparently, these intrinsic pursuits are just inherently enjoyable and satisfying. And more importantly, they help us fulfill some really fundamental needs that we all have.
Okay, like what kind of needs?
They're things like competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Feeling competent is about feeling like you're good at something and that you can make things happen. Autonomy is about having control over your own life, making your own choices. And relatedness is all about those meaningful connections with other people, feeling like you belong.
Right. Those are like the building blocks of well-being, aren't they?
Right.
Feeling capable and control and connected to others.
Absolutely. And intrinsic goals tend to naturally support those needs. For example, think about learning a new skill. That gives you a sense of competence, right? Or volunteering for a cause you believe in. That can foster both autonomy and relatedness. And of course, deepening friendships is all about relatedness.
Makes sense. Those activities all involve, actively choosing to do something that brings you joy and helps you grow and connect.
Yeah, you're the one in the driver's seat. You're not doing it because someone told you to or because you're chasing some external reward.
But what about extrinsic goals? How do those typically affect these core needs?
Well, they can sometimes get in the way, especially if you feel pressured or obligated to pursue them. Like if you're only doing something because you think you should or because you're afraid of what people will think if you don't.
So that sense of being controlled or lacking choice, that can really damage your well-being.
Exactly, because it undermines your sense of autonomy, like you're not really living your own life.
And I guess even if you achieve those extrinsic goals, like if you become super wealthy or famous, it might not actually bring you lasting happiness if you felt forced along the way.
Right. It's like going through the motions without really feeling connected to the process. The review actually highlights how teens think about money. Like if they see it mainly as a way to gain status and buy fancy things versus using it to support loved ones or contribute to causes they care about, those are going to have totally different effects on their well-being.
So it's not just about what you achieve, it's about why you're doing it.
Exactly. The motivation is key. The more internalized and autonomous that motivation is, the more likely it is to lead to positive well-being.
Now, you mentioned earlier that not all extrinsic motivations are created equal. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So self-determination theory, which is often shortened to SDT, it actually breaks down extrinsic motivation into 4 different types. And they each represent a different level of how much the motivation feels like it's coming from within you.
Okay, so it's not just a simple black and white intrinsic versus extrinsic thing.
No, it's much more nuanced than that. And understanding these different types can help us see how even extrinsic goals can sometimes support well-being.
All right, well, let's hear about these 4 types then.
Okay, so the first one is called external regulation. This is basically when you're only doing something because of external rewards or punishments. Like imagine a teenager who only studies for a test because they know they'll get grounded if they fail. It's pure external pressure.
Got it. What's the next one?
The next level up is called introjected regulation. This is where the motivation is a bit more internal, but it's still driven by a need to feel good about yourself or avoid negative feelings like guilt or shame.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. So a student might push themselves to get good grades, not because they actually care about the subject, but because they want to feel proud of themselves, or because they don't want to disappoint their parents.
So the pressure's coming from inside their own head now, but it's still tied to those external outcomes.
Exactly. It's not about a genuine interest in the activity itself. It's about how it makes them feel or how others will perceive them.
And what's the next level after that?
The next one is called identified regulation. This is where you consciously choose to do something because you value the benefits it will bring, even if the activity itself isn't all that fun.
So it's like you understand the bigger picture and you're willing to put in the work, even if it's not always enjoyable.
Precisely. Like a student who takes a really tough science class, even though they hate it because they know it'll help them get into med school, That's identified regulation. They're aligning themselves with the value of the outcome, even if the process isn't inherently fun.
That makes sense. And it seems like a much healthier form of motivation than the first two we talked about.
It is. It's definitely a step towards greater autonomy.
Okay, so what's the final type of extrinsic motivation?
The most autonomous type is called integrated regulation. This is when the extrinsic goal isn't just something you value, but it's actually become fully integrated with your core beliefs and your sense of self. It's become a part of who you are.
So it's like the goal has become so meaningful to you that it doesn't even feel extrinsic anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's aligned with your deepest values and aspirations. A good example might be someone who's passionate about social justice and decides to become a lawyer, not for the money or prestige, but because it gives them the tools to fight for what they believe in.
So even something like pursuing wealth can be a positive thing if it's driven by those deeper intrinsic reasons.
Absolutely. And the review emphasizes that this applies to teenagers, too. It's not just about adults. If a teenager sees wealth as a way to make a positive impact on the world versus just buying a bunch of stuff, that's going to have a very different effect on their well-being.
But it all comes back to that why, doesn't it?
Totally. The why is everything.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the school environment. I mean,
Yeah.
school is such a big part of a teenager's life, right? So how do these success beliefs play out in that context?
That's a really important question. And the review points out that schools often place a lot of emphasis on extrinsic rewards, grades, test scores, honor rolls, all that stuff.
Which makes sense in a way, right?
Yeah.
They need some way to measure progress.
Yeah. But the problem is that this focus on external rewards can sometimes undermine intrinsic motivation,
Yeah.
especially during adolescence when teens are already facing so much pressure to perform.
So it's like the system that's supposed to be helping them succeed might actually be pushing them towards the wrong kind of motivation.
Yeah, that's one of the concerns raised by the research. And it can create this kind of controlling environment where students feel like they're always being judged and evaluated, which can be really demotivating.
And on top of that, the review also points out that how schools define success, often very narrowly focused on academic performance, that might not align with how students themselves define success, like what they actually value and want to achieve in their lives.
Right, and that mismatch can be really damaging. It can make them feel like their own goals and aspirations aren't important or valid.
And that's got to be tough for a teenager who's
Yeah.
already trying to figure out who they are and what they want.
Exactly. It can really impact their sense of autonomy and their overall well-being. So the question is, what can schools do to address this?
Well, the review talks about this concept called positive education, which sounds really promising. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So positive education is basically about promoting not just academic achievement, but also overall well-being, happiness, and psychological health. It's about recognizing that education should be about more than just grades and test scores.
Okay, so it's about the whole person, not just their academic abilities.
Exactly. And it draws on best practices from both the field of education and positive psychology. So it's really this holistic approach.
Sounds good. But how does it actually work in practice? Like, what do they do differently in positive education?
Well, it's all about nurturing those core psychological needs we talked about earlier: competence, autonomy, and relatedness.
Right, the building blocks.
Exactly. And they do this through a variety of activities and approaches, like, for example, encouraging collaboration and empathy among students. That helps build stronger relationships and a sense of belonging.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about competence? How do they foster that?
By providing opportunities for students to identify and use their strengths in different ways, like maybe they're really good at art or music or public speaking, giving them chances to shine in those areas can really boost their confidence and motivation.
I like that. And of course, autonomy is all about giving students choices and a voice in their learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And that can be as simple as letting them choose what topics they want to research for a project,
Yeah.
or giving them some say in how they want to be assessed.
So it's about making them feel like active participants in their own education.
Exactly. And the review suggests that even just having open discussions about the meaning of success and the importance of authenticity and well-being, that can be really beneficial for teenagers, helping them figure out what's truly important to them.
That's such a crucial conversation to have at that age because they're bombarded with so many messages about success from society. It's easy to lose sight of what actually matters to you.
Totally. And the review also mentions something called success narratives as a useful tool for encouraging this kind of reflection.
What are success narratives?
They're basically stories about people who have achieved success in different ways. It's a way to expose teenagers to different perspectives and help them think critically about what success means to them personally.
So not just the typical, rags to riches stories, but a wider range of experiences.
Exactly. It's about broadening their horizons and showing them that there are many paths to a fulfilling life.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the theory behind success beliefs. Now let's get into the actual findings of the research. What were some of the common themes that emerged about how teenagers define success?
Okay, so across these 17 studies, there were several themes that kept popping up. One big one was self-actualization.
And that basically means like reaching your full potential, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's about personal growth, finding your purpose, feeling fulfilled. It's like that feeling of being on the right track and living a life that's true to yourself.
That definitely aligns with a lot of what we've been talking about. So what were some of the other big themes?
Another one was happiness. Now, for some teens, happiness was seen as a direct result of achieving something they considered successful. Like, if I achieve this, then I'll be happy. But for others, it was more of a general state of being, feeling content and positive regardless of specific achievements.
So happiness is both a destination and a journey.
Exactly. And then, of course, connection was a major theme. Strong relationships with family and friends, feeling loved and supported, that was super important to a lot of teens.
Makes sense. We're social creatures after all.
Right, and those are some of the more internal themes. Now, as for external themes, money came up a lot. But interestingly, it was often tied to feelings of security and comfort rather than just pure wealth, like wanting to be financially stable and provide for themselves and their families.
So it's not about being rich and famous. It's about having enough to live comfortably.
That seemed to be the main concern. And then career was another common theme. But the focus was on finding work that was satisfying and enjoyable, not necessarily about climbing the corporate ladder or making a ton of money.
It's about finding a career that aligns with their values and interests.
Right. And interestingly, contribution also came up quite a bit. The desire to make a difference in the world, to help others, to leave a positive mark. That was definitely on the radar for many teens, although maybe not as much as some of the other themes.
I guess that makes sense at that age. You're still figuring out your own place in the world.
Yeah, but it's encouraging to see that they're already thinking about how they can contribute to something bigger than themselves.
Definitely. And finally, status. Things like popularity, image recognition. Those were mentioned, but they weren't as prominent as some of those other themes.
And the review actually points out that those more internalized aspects, like self-actualization, happiness connection, those seem to be the most central to how teens define success.
Which, again, really highlights the importance of intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. It's not about keeping up with the Joneses. It's about finding what truly matters to you and pursuing it for the right reasons.
All right, so we've got a pretty good sense of how teenagers define success. Now let's connect that back to their well-being. How did these different beliefs actually play out in terms of their happiness and mental health?
Well, it wasn't always easy to directly measure well-being in these studies, especially the qualitative ones. But there was this recurring observation that success and happiness were closely linked. Like experiencing happiness was often seen as either a sign of success or a natural outcome of achieving something meaningful.
So it's like a chicken and egg situation. Does success lead to happiness, or does happiness lead to success?
Maybe a bit of both, but what's clear is that they're definitely connected. And of course, we talked earlier about how the pressure to succeed can be really harmful, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like if you're constantly feeling like you're not good enough or that you have to achieve certain things to be worthy, that can take a huge toll on your mental health.
Absolutely. And the review highlights that this pressure can lead to increased stress and anxiety among teens, especially if they feel like it's coming from external sources, like their parents or teachers or society in general.
So it's about finding that balance, right,
Mm.
between striving for something meaningful and not letting the pressure crush you.
Exactly.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier those Russian studies that looked at different success models and how they related to well-being, right?
Yes, those were really interesting. What did they find?
So they identified four main models. The first one was self-development and self-actualization, which is pretty much what we've been talking about all along.
Yeah.
Focusing on personal growth, intrinsic motivation, all that good stuff.
I'm guessing this model was linked to positive well-being outcomes.
You guessed it. Teens who endorsed this model tended to have higher self-esteem, greater life satisfaction, a stronger sense of purpose, and even a greater desire for healthy friendships. It's like all those positive things we associate with a fulfilling life.
So it really does seem like focusing on those intrinsic goals is the key to happiness.
It definitely points in that direction. And the other models kind of reinforced that idea. Like the second model they identified was social recognition, where success is all about achieving status and recognition from others.
So basically being popular and respected.
Yeah, and this model was linked to some positive self-belief. But interestingly, it didn't show as strong a connection to overall life satisfaction and social well-being as the self-actualization model.
So it's like you might feel good about yourself in the moment, but it doesn't necessarily translate into deeper, lasting happiness.
Exactly. And then the third model was fulfillment of external social requirements. This is where success is seen as meeting those expectations that are imposed on you from the outside, like getting good grades or following a certain career path.
So it's about doing what's expected of you, even if it doesn't feel personally meaningful.
Right. And this model was actually associated with the poorest well-being outcomes. Lower self-esteem, lower life satisfaction, reduced motivation. It's like you're living someone else's life instead of your own.
And that can be so draining and ultimately unfulfilling.
Absolutely. And the final model was called diffused awareness. This one's kind of interesting. It basically describes teenagers who have a very broad and kind of scattered understanding of success. Like they haven't really narrowed down what it means to them personally.
So they're not really sure what they're aiming for.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to be everything to everyone. And this model was also linked to negative well-being outcomes, like reluctance to set goals, low levels of satisfaction, and a general lack of meaning in life.
It seems like having a clear and personally meaningful definition of success is really crucial for well-being, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic.
Exactly. And the review explicitly connects these different success models back to self-determination theory. You know, those 4 types of motivation we talked about earlier.
Right. And it basically says that the more internalized and autonomous your motivation is, the better it is for your well-being.
Exactly. It all comes back to that sense of ownership and choice.
And before we wrap up, let's revisit those gender differences we touched on earlier. What did the research overall say about how boys and girls might see success differently?
Okay, so across multiple studies, there were some pretty consistent patterns. Girls tended to place a higher value on personal growth, self-development, helping others, nurturing relationships, all those good things.
Which again aligns with what we've been talking about in terms of intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. And boys, on the other hand, they were more likely to emphasize social recognition, or in some cases, they just had a less clear idea of what success meant to them.
So girls leaning more towards those intrinsic and relational aspects of success, while boys might be a bit more focused on external validation or just haven't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah, that seems to be the general trend. And one study that looked specifically at American teenagers found that girls also placed a higher value on contributing to society and engaging in religious activities.
So maybe there are some cultural factors at play as well.
Yeah, the review suggests that these findings definitely align with traditional gender stereotypes and societal expectations. You know, boys are often encouraged to be more competitive and achievement-oriented, while girls are socialized to be more nurturing and relationship-focused.
And those messages start early, don't they?
Definitely. It's all around them from a very young age.
Okay, so final question. The review talked about images of success, who teenagers actually see as successful figures. What were some of the key findings there?
So several studies asked teens to name people they considered successful, and overall male figures were the most commonly mentioned.
Which is surprising given how male-dominated many fields still are.
Right. And parents were also a very popular choice, which highlights the importance of family influence.
Makes sense. Parents are often our first role models.
Exactly. And other figures that came up frequently were people involved in philanthropy and helping others, especially among American teens.
So there's definitely a sense of wanting to make a positive impact on the world.
Yeah. And then, of course, celebrities, politicians, wealthy individuals, those were all mentioned too.
So a mix of people who have achieved recognition in different ways.
Right. And those gender patterns we've been talking about, those also showed up in terms of who teens identified as successful.
Like, girls were more likely to name successful women, while boys tended to name their fathers or figures in male-dominated fields.
Exactly. So it really seems like the role models we're exposed to can shape our own beliefs about what's possible and what's considered successful.
Which again highlights the importance of representation, right? Showing teens that success can come in many forms and that anyone can achieve it, regardless of gender or background.
Absolutely. The more diverse and inclusive our images of success are, the better equipped teens will be to define success for themselves in a way that's authentic and meaningful.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of how teenagers view success and how those beliefs connect to their well-being.
Yeah, me too. It's such a complex and important topic.
And for you, the listener, I think the key takeaway here is that teenagers have a much more nuanced view of success than we might give them credit for. And those views are deeply intertwined with their happiness and overall well-being.
And the research really points to the importance of fostering those intrinsic motivations, helping teens find what truly matters to them and supporting them in pursuing those goals for the right reasons.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about achieving some arbitrary definition of success. It's about living a life that feels fulfilling and aligned with your values.
Absolutely. And those gender differences we discussed, those are something to keep in mind too. How can we better support both boys and girls in developing healthy and realistic aspirations for their lives?
That's a great question, and one that I hope we can all continue to reflect on. So here's a final thought for you to ponder. What's your personal definition of success right now? How has it evolved since you were a teenager? And most importantly, how is that definition affecting your own sense of well-being and happiness? Think about the motivations behind your goals. Are they driven by that sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness that we talked about? Or are you chasing something that doesn't truly align with your values? It's definitely something worth exploring further in your own life.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to leave it. It's all about that inner journey, isn't it?
It really is. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
Take care.